Okay, welcome everyone. I'll get started. My name is Jeff Harrison. I am the current chair of the board of directors of the Grain Farmers of Ontario, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight. Welcome our farmer attendees, CCA, government officials, decision makers, and of course, media. I especially want to thank, before we get started, all the folks from OMAFA and Agricorp for joining us here tonight and bringing their expertise to help our farmers. Unfortunately, the need for this webinar is brought to us because of a severe drought that is impacting certain areas of the province more so than others, but the reach of this drought is broadening its effect. And I know this firsthand. I live in the Trenton area, which is in the heart of Middle Eastern Ontario, and it has been affected not only by a very significant wet spring, but the impacts to our crops have been amplified as this drought takes hold. There is many experts on the call here tonight that will talk about production and our financial programs brought to us through Agricorp, and the expertise is here to help you. I want to say that our organization, the Grain Farmers of Ontario, cares very deeply for our farmer members, and we reached out to our partners in government and invited them to be a part of today and bring information to all of you, and in a way that will help us understand how these programs can work for us in these events. I want to say we've had the opportunity to host several officials in some of these impacted regions. I want to say thank you to those that have been here, and thank you to those that have tentatively scheduled to come for visits and understand firsthand. We do appreciate that as farmers, and look forward to those that have yet to come. Some of these programs, I just want to say before we start, might not be the news that we all want to hear as far as helping us through these challenging times, whether it's production or our commodity prices that will make it even more of a challenge. But the very important part of tonight is to understand what can realistically be expected out of these programs from farmers. And we look forward to engagement through questions, and we'll get started with that. So we have 7 presenters to speak on financial program support, crop management considerations, and mental health resources. From Agricorp, Debbie Brander, Manager, Product Management and Industry Relations, is here to present on how Agricorp business risk management programs can help. From OMAFA, John Cummings, Senior Policy Advisor, Ben Rosser, Corn Specialist, Horst Bonner, Soybean Specialist, and Christine O'Reilly, Forage and Grazier Specialist. They'll present on crop management options, including using crops as forages. As well, Peter Doris, Environmental Specialist, will present on water taking considerations, and Carmela Cupelli, Senior Program Analyst, will share her important mental health resources. With that, I'll turn it over to Manager of Member Relations at the Grain Farmers of Ontario, Rachel Telford, to touch on a few logistics for tonight's webinar.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Welcome everybody to tonight's webinar. Just a few things to note. On entry, everybody was muted, and we do ask that you keep yourselves on mute so as not to interfere with the presenters as they are speaking. We will have an opportunity for questions through several means. If you don't like to use the raise hand feature, or you're just a little bit shy and don't want to actually speak during the meeting, we do welcome you to enter any questions that you have into the chat. You can also private message myself, Rachel Telford, within the chat if you want your question to remain anonymous. If you do want to ask a question verbally, use the raise hand feature, which you can find in the React menu at the bottom of your screen. Just a reminder as well that today's meeting is being recorded, and we do ask that any questions that are entered into the chat or that are asked verbally are done so in a very respectful manner, and with consideration to everybody else on the call, in particular our guests that we do have with us tonight to provide information. We will have the question and answers broken up during 2 breaks between the presenters. So again, please hold verbal questions until such time as we open questions, or along the way, enter them into the chat. that is all the logistics for now. I'll return it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Rachel. To start off, Debbie Brander will present on how Agricorp business risk management programs can help. And then John Cummings, Senior Policy Advisor with OMAFA, will share other financial support. So welcome, Debbie and John.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by saying that we understand how severe this situation is for your crop yields and feed availability, and really appreciate this opportunity to provide some information on how our programs can help. Most importantly for us right now, we really want to talk to our customers individually to make sure we understand your situation and can help you review your options and next steps to help you make the best decisions for your farm. We're ready to walk customers through the claim process, as we know that getting payments made as quickly as possible is essential in situations like this. This slide highlights how production insurance, agri-stability, and the risk management program work together to cover the risks that you face as a sector. In particular, production insurance covers yield reductions and quality losses caused by dry conditions. Agri-stability also covers more severe yield reductions, as well as large declines in income or extra expenses caused by things like trucking water or moving livestock. In the next few slides, I'm going to talk about each of these in more detail. I'm going to focus on production insurance first. I'm going to be talking about coverage for grains and oilseeds as well as forage, but if anyone on the line has coverage for other commodities, it works in a very similar way. A number of farmers across the province have coverage for their grains and oilseed crops. Crop losses due to the dry conditions that you are facing are absolutely covered under the program. To review how production insurance works at a high level, you're assigned a guaranteed level of production that's unique to your farm for each crop you insure. So there's a separate one for corn, soybeans, wheat, etc. It is based on your historic production and your selected coverage level. If your actual yield this year is below your guaranteed production, you'll be paid a claim for the difference. The next two slides are talking about some features that are really applicable in dry weather situations. One key feature of the production insurance coverage is the flexibility to accommodate crop harvested for different end uses, for example, grazing or chopping as green feed. This coverage is available regardless of the quality of the crop. For example, the crop does not need to be damaged in order for Agricorp to consent to it being used for a different end use. We have a process in place to establish a yield based on the crop in the field, taking into account any damage because of an insured peril. If the crop has minimal value and is used for a nominal use, we will assign a nominal value. On the other hand, we would also want to reflect any high yields and an equivalent yield to ensure it's reflected in your average farm yield, because it's the basis of your future coverage. We know that there is crop that's already severely damaged to the point of questioning whether there's value to harvest it. We know this is a very difficult and stressful situation when it happens. That's why we would want to talk to you one-on-one about your coverage and the impacts of making this type of decision. If the crop is determined to be impractical to harvest and have no feed value, we will assign a zero yield to those acres. That zero yield will be used for claim purposes. I also want to share how this affects your future coverage. Because your future coverage is based on your yields over the past 10 years, production insurance has a mechanism to ensure that one bad year will not have a significant impact. This is called buffering. Buffering is done automatically for all customers. Buffering helps stabilize your average farm yield to lessen the impact of extreme yields so that one bad year doesn't significantly impact your future coverage. At a high level, this picture shows how buffering works. Basically, if your crop yields less than 70% of your 10-year average for that crop, buffering will apply. For example, if your harvested production is zero, That zero would be buffered 2/3 of the way back to 70% of your average farm yield. This means that next year, in your historic average or your average farm yield, you would see a value that reflects 46% of your average farm yield rather than that zero yield. This is something we would want to walk through with you one-on-one, but there is information and examples on our website if you'd like more information. We also have a number of farmers with coverage for hay and pasture under our forage rainfall plan. This coverage uses rainfall as an indicator of the quantity and quality of forage. Rainfall is collected between May and August and provided to Agricorp by a third party. The rainfall is also populated on our website if you'd like to check it out. If a customer's chosen rainfall collection station receives less than the guaranteed rainfall amount, the customer will receive a claim. A claim factor is also applied that increases the payment as the percent of rainfall decreases, really to account for the additional cost of sourcing hay in extreme situations. Once we receive the rainfall in mid-September, we will immediately start the process to determine and issue claims. Customers do not need to do anything. I'm going to switch gears to agri-stability. Agri-stability protects the net income of your whole farm rather than just covering one commodity at a time like production insurance. Agri-stability covers crops, livestock, including supply managed commodities, and byproducts. Agri-stability covers large declines in net income, including production losses like we're seeing in dry conditions, and increased costs. Agri-stability has been proven to respond in challenging times by protecting you when your net farming income falls below 70% of your recent average. This slide shows a picture from our website, agricorp.com, of how the program works. There's lots of information on agricorp.com about our programs, including agri-stability. I also wanted to note that there's some really good simple videos on how to participate in agri-stability, the program features, and how payments are calculated. I also wanted to note that to improve support for farmers, the federal and provincial governments have increased the agri-stability compensation rate from 80% to 90% for the 2025 program year only. This means if you get a payment, it will be calculated with a rate that is 10% higher. One feature I wanted to point out about agri-stability is interim payments. Interim payments are an important feature of the program that can provide cash flow now when farmers need it most. If your income has declined substantially and you've completed 6 months of your fiscal year, you can submit an application. Interim payments are 50% of the estimated final payment. Let us know if you'd like help walking through the application. The application can be found online or you can call us to complete it. Risk management programs provide protection from low commodity prices and production costs. Coverage is not tied to production, but knowing the timing of any possible payments may be important to customers that are also dealing with dry conditions. For a risk management program, grain and oilseed customers specifically, payments, if issued, would be paid in November and May. For livestock, if triggered, payments would be issued in September, December, and March. I wanted to highlight our website, agricorp.com. At the bottom of our homepage, there is a link directing viewers to resources including production insurance, agri-stability, interim payments, and other information that's pertinent to dry conditions. I also wanted to highlight there's information on direct deposit. Direct deposit is a fast, easy, secure way to get your money 5 to 7 days faster than by check if you're expecting a payment. To recap some of the information on the past slides, Agricorp staff are ready to answer questions and walk you through your coverage options and the claim process based on your individual situation. Some tips to get payments faster include reporting damage as soon as it's evident. We're ready to help you with the next steps. Report yield separately for each crop. That way, Agricorp can process claims right away when there's a production loss. I just talked about interim agri-stability payments. Please consider those if you're experiencing financial distress and give us a call and we can help you through the process. Also, another reminder to enroll in direct deposit if you are expecting a payment. Finally, I encourage you to consider AgriInvest to help with cash flow. Speaking of AgriInvest, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague John Cumming from the ministry to talk about AgriInvest as well as some other financial options that you can explore. Thanks very much, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by saying that we understand how severe this situation is for your crop yields and feed availability. And
I'm sorry, can I stop you? I'm going to.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by saying that we understand how severe this situation is for your crop yields and feed availability, and really appreciate the opportunity to provide some information on how our programs help. Most importantly for us right now, we want to talk to our customers individually to make sure we understand and can help you review your options and next steps to help you make the best decisions for your farm. We're ready to walk customers through the claim process, as we know that getting payments made as quickly as possible is essential in times like this. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Good afternoon. Let me start again.
Yeah, you just start again. I'll let you keep doing this.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. I want to start by saying that we understand how severe this situation is for your crop yields and feed availability, and appreciate this opportunity to provide more information on how our programs can help. Most importantly for us right now, we want to talk to our customers individually to make sure we understand your situation and can help you review your options and next steps to help you make decisions that are best for your farm. We are ready to walk customers through the claim process, as we know that getting payments made as quickly as possible is essential in times like this. This slide highlights how production insurance, agri-stability, and the risk management program work together to cover the risks that you face in your sector. In particular, production insurance covers yield losses due to dry conditions. Agri-stability also covers extreme yield losses, in addition to lost income and higher expenses such as trucking, water, or moving livestock. In the next few slides, I'll talk about each in more detail. I'm going to focus on production insurance coverage first. I'm going to be talking about grain and oilseeds and forage coverage, but if anyone on the call insures other crops, the coverage works fairly similarly. A number of farmers across the province have coverage for their grain and oilseed crops. Crop losses due to the dry conditions that you're facing are absolutely covered under this program. To review how production insurance works at a high level, you are assigned a guaranteed level of production that's unique to your farm for each crop you insure. So there's a separate guarantee for corn, soybeans, wheat, and so on. It is based on your historic production and your selected coverage level. If your actual yield this year is below your guaranteed production, you'll be paid a claim for the difference. The next two slides are talking about some features that are really applicable in dry conditions. A key feature of production insurance coverage is the flexibility to accommodate crop harvested for different end uses like grazing or chopping as green feed. This feature is available regardless of the quality of your crop. For example, the crop does not need to be damaged in order for Agricorp to consent to it being used for a different end use than originally intended. We have a process in place to establish a yield based on the crop in the field, taking into account any damage because of an insured peril or dry conditions in this case. If the crop has minimal value, we will assign a nominal value. On the other hand, we would also want to reflect any high yields in an equivalent yield to ensure it's reflected in your average farm yield which is the basis of your future coverage. We know that there's crop that's already severely damaged to the point of questioning the value of harvesting it. We know this is very difficult and a stressful situation when it happens. That's why we would want to walk through your coverages and impacts when making this type of decision. If the crop is determined to be impractical to harvest and have no feed value, we'll assign a zero yield to those acres. That zero yield will be used for claim purposes, but I also want to show how this affects your future coverage. Because your future coverage is based on your yields over the past 10 years, production insurance has a mechanism to ensure that one bad year will not have a significant impact. This is called buffering. Buffering is done automatically for all customers. Buffering helps stabilize your average farm yield and lessen the impact of an extreme yield so that one bad year does not significantly impact your future coverage. At a high level, this picture shows how buffering works. Basically, if your crop yields less than 70% compared to your 10-year average for that crop, buffering will apply. For example, if your harvested production was 0, it would be buffered 2/3 of the way back to 70% of your average farm yield. That means that next year, in your average farm yield, you would see a value of about 46% of your average farm yield rather than a 0. This is something we would really want to walk through one-on-one with you, but there's also information and examples on our website if you'd like more information right now. We also have a number of farmers with coverage for hay and pasture under our forage rainfall plan. This coverage uses rainfall as an indicator of quantity and quality of forage. Rainfall is collected between May and August and provided to us by a third-party service. If a customer's chosen rainfall collection station receives less than the guaranteed rainfall amount, the customer will receive a claim. A claim factor is also applied that increases the payment as the percent rainfall decreases to account for the additional cost of sourcing hay in extreme situations. Once we receive the rainfall in mid-September, we'll immediately start the process to determine and issue claims. Customers don't need to do anything. We also post the rainfall on agricorp.com if you're interested. Moving on to agrostability. Agrostability protects the net income of your whole farm rather than just one commodity at a time like production insurance does. Agrostability covers crops, livestock, including supply managed commodities, and byproducts. And it really covers large declines in net income, including production losses like we're experiencing, as well as increased costs and lost income. Agrostability has been proven to respond in challenging times by protecting you when your net farming income falls below 70% of your recent average. This slide includes a picture from our website, agricorp.com, of how the program works. There's a lot of good information on our website, including information on agrostability and simple videos that show how to participate, key program features, and how payments are calculated. I also wanted to note that to improve support for farmers, the federal and provincial governments have increased the agrostability compensation rate from 80% to 90% for 2025. This means if you get a payment, it will be calculated with a rate that's 10% higher. One important feature of agrostability that I want to point out is interim payments. Interim payments are an important feature that can provide cash flow now when farmers need it most. If your income has declined substantially and you've completed 6 months of your fiscal year, you can submit an interim payment application. Interim payments are 50% of the estimated final payment. Feel free to call us or complete the application online. Risk management programs provide protection from low commodity prices and production costs. Coverage is not tied to production, but knowing the timing of any possible payments may be important to customers also dealing with dry conditions. As you can see on this slide, payments, if generated for grain and oilseed customers, are issued in November and May, and for livestock customers are issued in September, December, and March. I wanted to highlight again some information that's on agricorp.com. There is a lot of different information on our programs, including a link or banner at the bottom of our homepage that we've added, directing customers to resources specifically about dry weather conditions, including production insurance information, agri-stability interims, etc. Another item that's on our website that I wanted to highlight is how to sign up for direct deposit. Signing up for direct deposit, if you're expecting a payment, provides it faster, it's simple, and it's also very secure. You can get your payments up to 5 to 7 days faster. Just to recap some of the program coverage that could help in situations like this. Production insurance, agri-stability are definitely two programs that there's lots of information that you can find more about on our website, and call us to walk through any of your questions or coverage options. We're ready to answer your questions. Some tips to get program payments faster: report your damage as soon as it's evident. Also report your yields separately for each crop. That way we can start the claim process right away if there's a production loss. I talked about interim agri-stability payments as a good option if you're experiencing financial distress, as well as signing up for direct deposit to get payments quicker. I also want to highlight AgriInvest as an option to help with cash flow. My colleague John Cumming from the ministry is going to talk a little bit about AgriInvest as well as some other financial options you might consider.
Thanks, Debbie. My name's John. I work for OMAFA, the ministry, and there's just 2 points I wanted to kind of make aside from what Debbie has spoken to about the BRM programs. So the first one is around AgriInvest. Now, AgriInvest is a program that is this cost share between the province and Canada. It's administered by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and hopefully many of you have been taking advantage of the deposit match options provided to you from AgriInvest over the years. You would have gotten deposit match notices or deposit notices from AFC by way of filing your T1163, your taxes, or your corporate forms through to Agricorp. And like, this is a deposit match program that's there for things like increased costs, cash flow issues. And I'll point out that the withdrawals are producer initiated. For those of you who have been around long enough, it's not like NISA where you need to trigger. These funds can be accessed at any time. I recognize that people can access them at any time, so they might have taken them out prior years for prior purposes. But I think the message I would leave you with here is, if you have funds in your accounts and you have a need, please consider accessing them. The funds are there to be used for situations like this. And there's one other point that I think that we'd like to make. I recognize, having spoken to a few producers in the last little while, that people are very concerned about debt servicing. And clearly, there's a number of other lenders of note. There's the big 5 banks, there's credit unions, and there's ag-specific lenders like FCC or ACC. And ACC runs out of Ontario here. They run both provincial and federal loan programs, and hopefully, again, some people have taken advantage of the commodity loan or the advanced payments program. And so, just as Debbie's messaging was to contact Agricorp early to discuss programming options, if you're concerned about debt servicing, I'd urge you to consider contacting your lender early about your individual circumstance to review repayment options. And that's, I think, the entirety of my message there.
Thank you to both Debbie and John for your presentation. We do appreciate the information that you have shared with us this evening. I would like to note that you will see occasionally within the chat a few links and other pieces of information, contact information being posted there for you. If you happen to miss that information, I don't have a chance to copy and paste it into a Word document or elsewhere in your computer to access later, don't worry, everybody that registered for this webinar will get those links emailed to them after the presentation. Again, we are opening for a live Q&A at this time. If you are comfortable with it, you can enter questions into the chat directly for everybody to see. If you prefer to be anonymous, just select my name from the available list of people that you can message and type it directly to myself. If you would like to ask a question verbally, we do welcome that as well. And to do that, please use the raise hand feature, which you can find from the React button at the bottom of your screen. Again, we do ask if you do choose to make a question verbally that you are respectful in the way you're asking your questions in consideration for our guests this evening. And as well, please try and be as brief as possible in respect of the time that we do have here tonight. So with that, again, please feel free to let us know if you do have any questions that you would like to ask. I think that, to start things off, that, we would like to maybe go back to you, Debbie, and just, see, I think we want to recommend maybe some patience to people. I know that in the past, maybe people, when they're contacting Agricorp, sometimes, they do have concerns with being able to be in contact with somebody. So could we have maybe some tips and recommendations on the best way to connect with people at Agricorp?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, that's a really good question. We do get hundreds of calls a day, even at our low points. Some things I would recommend is, if at all possible, try to avoid the lunchtime hour, because we do get a flush of calls at the lunchtime hour. We also have a callback feature, and it works really well. You will get a phone call back within the day. So I would encourage you to use that as well.
Great, thank you. And then we did have a comment as well from the chat. But before we get to that, I do see that we have a hand raised from Lloyd Pro, and I will ask Lloyd to unmute himself and ask his question at this time.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, go ahead.
I noticed a lot of zero yields are going to be in effect in our area, my district, District 13, and that's a big concern. And I'm glad to see how you explained the buffering so that it's not actually a zero, because we take the good years and really strive to build our averages up in preparation for a drought year like this year. Do you not actually also buffer the high yields?
Yes, you're right, Lloyd. It is buffered on both ends. So any extreme yields, both high and low, are buffered so that your average farm yield is stable and your coverage remains stable.
I wished it wasn't. The high yields, I wish they weren't buffered, but I guess I can't do anything about that.
Thank you, Lloyd, for your question. From the chat, we do have a question. When do the agri-invest funds have to be in the account to get the match dollars for 2025?
Yeah, I can take this one. The deadline for for your 2024 tax year, you should receive your deposit notice by September 30th of this coming year. So some people will have received them already. A few more will get them. And I believe you have 90 days after you receive the notice to make your deposit for it to be matched.
Thank you for that answer, John, and thank you for the question in the chat. We do have another question on using corn for forage, which was originally planted for grain. A commenter checked a field today. About 40% of plants have no ear, just stalk and tassel. What is the reduced value as a forage feed?
Great question. And I did highlight that a little bit in the presentation, but first and foremost, it's important to call us. So every individual situation is a little bit different. So we want you to give us a ring so that we can talk through the coverage. If you're harvesting your crop for a different end use, for example, silage, we will come out and assess a yield. So we will factor that yield based on the damage in the field. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one relationship if the cobs are only 40%. But I guess my key message, though, is give us a call.
And another question, where can we find information regarding Agri-Invest?
So either John or I can take that.
Yeah.
Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada website is the best spot to find information about AgriInvest. And I think we can provide a phone number through the materials as well for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada.
Again, we do encourage anybody that wishes to ask a question. We are here to make sure you have all the information that you need going forward in the next couple of weeks with the difficult circumstances that everybody is dealing with. So we will give another moment for questions to come up. I do see one here just now coming up. Is it still a requirement to participate in production insurance RMP or AgriStability to participate in AgriInvest? John, did you want to field that one?
Sure. So I believe the only mandatory kind of cross eligibility here is between RMP and production insurance. The other programs, Agri-Instability and AgriInvest, you can participate in independently, not at all. It's up to the producer's discretion.
I'm not seeing any more questions coming in at this time. So that we can remain on schedule with our webinar tonight, we will now proceed with our next presenters. But do keep in mind, we do have more opportunities for questions. So again, at any time, if you do think of something, please enter it into the chat and we will make sure to get back to it before the end of the webinar. At this time, I'm going to hand it back over to Jeff to introduce our next speakers.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, John, very much. We'll be moving on, second half of our meeting. Next, next from OMAFA, our host, Horst Bonner, soybean specialist, Ben Rosser, corn specialist, and Christine O'Reilly, forage and grazier specialist, to present on crop management options, including crops and forages. So welcome, Horst, Ben, and Christine.
Yes, thank you, everybody, for the invitation. We really appreciate the opportunity. And when we think about the impact of moisture stress on soybeans, there's no question that it's very serious. And when you get out there in a field, you'll notice right away that, of course, there is a tremendous variability, not just based on rainfall, but also just water holding capacity. So I took this picture earlier in the week, and you can see that on the left-hand side, those beans are really stressed. And on the right-hand side, they still have the opportunity to maybe recover to a certain extent. And one of the real benefits of the type of soybeans that we grow is, of course, that they flower for a long time, right? About 6 weeks. And that means if there's a stress during a certain part of that flowering period, the first couple of weeks, let's use that as an example, and then you get a decent rain, that those beans can really recover nicely. And we've seen that in our careers, right, where the beans look kind of tough in July, and then you get a rain on the 1st of August, and they really recover very well. So this picture I took earlier in the week as well, in part of a field that was really stressed. And the part I want you to notice there, of course, is that they're starting to yellow. They're starting to senesce. And so here we are on the 14th of August, and flowering has come to an end, right? So the simple fact of the matter is that means that these fields can no longer fully recover. The seed size, the seed number, the pod number is set, right? And so even if we get a nice rain on these really affected fields, they simply don't have the capacity to make up for those lost seeds. Now, some of us were really fortunate on Monday night to get a decent rain, and for those crops that still had a real potential, certainly that helps, and that did help. And really, moisture right up until about the full seed stage, when the seed inside the pod separates from the membrane, can help. and it helps in terms of seed size. So, and that corresponds typically to yellowing as the crop starts to senesce. So one of the questions that we get, is there something we can do about this nutrient uptake problem if the crop looks quite promising? And then, you start to see this moisture stress. We know that nitrogen fixation ends. And, is there a foliar feeding product, a biostimulant, a nitrogen fertilizer? And the long and the short of it is, on that front, the results have been inconsistent. The work carries on. There are many trials every year that are trying to figure this out. But for our purpose tonight, that window has closed one way or the other, right? Those products are really meant to be applied earlier in the season. And like I say, they're really all still in the testing phase. And so that's not an option for us to try and help that crop along. The one thing that I think is definitely worth considering, again, for those that still have good yield potential in the field, there are a lot of spider mites around. And that's many of these fields that look stressed in the Southwest I'm talking about now also have spider mites. And so we really want you to take the time to assess whether you have mites, because it's this multiple stress that will impact yield even more than just the drought stress. And of course, when you're looking for spider mites, they're very small. You can see on the left-hand side there, you look for that stippling on the leaves, that sandblasted effect. And obviously the picture on the bottom right-hand side is magnified. You can barely see mites with the naked eye, but the question comes up, how long, like here we are again on the 14th, is it too late to consider either mite or, in this case, Japanese beetle control? And the answer is really we try to reduce as much stress as possible right up to the R6 stage, the full green bean stage. Within the top part of the plant, we want the seed to fill the canopy, right, or fill the pod. And that's when we say it's over in terms of control measures. And most of the fields in the Southwest are still a week to 10 days away from full R6. So as we think about what happens to the soybean plant with stress, again, it's really about how long the stress is, not so much the intensity over a short period of time. And if it's only in the beginning of July, you start to lose flowers, and then if it extends, you start to lose pods. And then if it stretches out even further, then you start to lose seed number. And then, of course, finally, seed size is also impacted in the end. And that's what I meant by, some of us that had that rain on Monday night, for sure, that will increase seed size, and that can make up for some of the earlier losses. But the reality is, this is a bean plant I picked up in one of those droughty areas, and boy, it's sad. There's just no way around it. You look at a handful of pods there, and we all know there should be 40 or 50 pods on that plant. There is no recovery for that plant. And then, of course, we really hope we don't get into this, but you should be aware of it. Back in 2002, 2001 as well, we did have that green bean issue. Dry green beans, it can happen if there's so little moisture in that plant that it can't properly, the enzyme in the plant can't properly metabolize the chlorophyll in the seed. And so hopefully we get enough moisture so we don't have that to deal with. So I was asked to, try and help us think about the potential yield loss, and there's all kinds of research out there, and I'm not here to say that we know what the number is. We don't know what the number is today across much of Ontario. But the simple fact is that when you look at the research, right, this is from Manitoba, 3 years of study, and what they did is they gave soybeans about 10 extra inches of rain in July and August, and then they just left beans alone. So the first column under each of those years is the excess, and then the rain fed, just what happened through nature, and then of course the deficit. And what they did is they gave those beans about 25 to 45% less water. And the interesting part is not every year did it, really impact yield by as much as you might expect, but no question, 16 to 32% on average yield reduction. So really the message I have for you is consider looking carefully, scouting carefully to see if you have insects or more likely spider mites. Those are still worth controlling. And of course, as we get into thinking about winter wheat in some of those fields where there's extra weeds now, and to try and even out the harvest timeliness, pre-harvest desiccant is worth thinking about as well. And that's really all I have for you. There is no easy answer, as I think we all know, on the soybean front when the rain stops. So I'll turn it over to Ben for discussion on corn, and then I think at the end we'll have questions.
Thanks, Horst, and thanks for the invitation. I'm just waiting for control, which I think I almost got. There we go. Yeah, so Ben Rosser, corn specialist with OMAFA. Similar to Horst, just want to talk about, when we're most concerned about yield losses due to moisture stress. And really our big concern, this is a bit of a data summary from various research that was pulled together at Iowa State. On the shoulders of the season, so very beginning and very end, minimal, but our biggest concern is right around tasseling and pollination when yield loss, in this case, they're saying after 4 days of stress is highest for the corn crop. And I think, there's years in the past where we're very, very dry up until tassel timing, and then all of a sudden we get some timely rains, and end of the year, we're quite surprised at how yields end out. Of course, this year, for a lot of areas, we did not get those rains, and yield loss numbers for those stressed during those periods can be quite high. But again, these are some very rough numbers summarized from Iowa. And again, there's cases where drought stress is quite extreme, and to the point where, corn was hardly able to tassel or pollinate at all. And, of course, I've heard about fields where there's hardly any ears out there because they didn't even get that far. So, extreme cases where things could be almost zero in some fields. But if you're trying to make a call to see what is out there, this is maybe a little old now that we're getting, a couple weeks past pollination. But the earliest time you could go out to look at that is looking at silks and see if they're detaching or not. Kind of the earliest time you can look at the success of pollination is seeing if those silks have detached. So normally if those ovules or potential kernels have not yet been fertilized, those silks will all still be attached like they are in the ear in the picture here. But you can go and you can really carefully kind of unwrap the husks, or if you've got a sharp knife, you can cut that small ear in half and then peel the husks away. And if you see that those silks readily detach from those ovules, and you might give it a little bit of a shake, but you don't want to pull so hard that you're pulling them off yourself, you can see how successful has pollination been up until that point, and at least gives you a bit of an idea early on. Once you get past that stage and things have successfully fertilized, this in the bottom left corner would be corn at the blister stage. You can just kind of see that little water-filled blister kernel just starting to develop, and you can see it's just kind of emerging out of those ovules in that bottom left picture. So again, that would be a good confirmation that we've at least fertilized those kernels. So the potential is there for those kernels to continue on. And of course, coming in later, maybe like we are now in a lot of fields, kind of in maybe R3 or milk stage, This is a picture of an ear from a field at Elora. It's quite obvious now which kernels were successfully pollinated, and you can see at the end tip of that ear where there's still some silks attached. You can see in those ovules, that little blister never formed. So you can look at that ear tip and say, that was not abortion in a lot of those cases. It was ovules that did not fertilize. In this case, it's just the tip end of that ear. So of course, we, when we're talking about yield loss, where does it come from? Pollination is probably the first spot where we could lose potential yield if we struggle to get good pollination or tassel and silk emergence, or having them occur at the same time in extreme cases. But of course, beyond there as well, even if we get good pollination or reasonable pollination, if moisture stress continues and leaves are wrapping in the heat of the day, that reduces photosynthesis. Even if we successfully pollinated those ears or the kernels and we're looking at our ears, we might not be able to keep all of those if those plants are stressed and they're not photosynthesizing, because moisture stress is continuing to be an issue. And that's where you'll start to run into kernel abortion. So this would be a case here where you can see the very top kind of third of the ear in that picture would be ovules that did not fertilize successfully. And then you can see those really white looking kernels with a kind of shrunken appearance, and you can see the yellow embryo inside of them. Those would be kernels that did successfully pollinate, but were later aborted due to some type of stress. The plant wasn't able to keep filling those ones. And of course, typically we'd see that start kind of at the tip and work its way down. Beyond that, we also see lighter kernel weights if those plants are stressed and they're not making sugars and they're not filling grain. If plants are severely stressed and they're cannibalizing themselves to try to finish grain or move nutrients, that can result in lodging, which can be more of a challenge and more potential yield loss, and lead to other harvest losses as well if we can't keep those plants standing, or we've got ears that are drooping or falling off of plants as well. One other question that's come up quite often in dry areas is when you go out to your field and you see those lower leaves fired up, quite often it's nitrogen deficiency. So the question is, well, can we go out and try to correct that issue in season if there's still enough grain fill left? And in a lot of these cases, it doesn't necessarily mean the nitrogen supply in the field is limiting. We've just had so little moisture, and nitrogen really relies on mass flow movement with water getting to plants, that we just haven't been able to get the nitrogen in that field to those plants. And in lieu of that nitrogen from the soil, the plants are remobilizing nitrogen from those lower leaves to keep the upper leaves alive and help with grain fill and that sort of thing. So practically speaking, especially if there's no moisture in the forecast, it's pretty tough to get any more nitrogen in those plants if you are seeing that firing up. And again, doesn't mean there's none in the environment. It just means that those plants aren't getting that nitrogen when they needed it. Last, again, in extreme cases, maybe not an option for everybody, but if you have livestock on your farm or you've got a neighbor with livestock and they are short on forage, if you have a field that clearly grain yield potential is not looking good, silage harvest could be an option to try to salvage that field. But if you are going that route, I think there's a lot of management that's going to be required that's maybe not of concern in a less stressful year from a moisture stress perspective. As has been mentioned several times already, if you've got crop insurance, the first thing to do is call Agricorp and work with them to make sure you're clear to go ahead with that. And then I think the next one is to review your product labels. Make sure nothing's been applied to that crop that would prevent you from taking that as a silage crop. In terms of special management considerations, I won't get into them in detail, but some of the things that really need to be considered are, for what is out there, can that quality meet your needs? I know some people have questioned, if you really need a high energy feed, but there's very little grain, can you still get by with what is in that field if it's largely just roughage and low energy, and supply it another source or that sort of thing? So just the value of what is out there, is it worth going for? I think another one is harvest moisture for fermentation. Of course, if you don't have much grain, it's pretty tough to use milk line as an indicator of what the moisture is. So I think it's really important to sample that field and get an idea what moisture levels are like. I was talking to one agronomist in Central Ontario where growers were kind of already at this stage. And despite the fact that plants look so dead and brown, the moisture can still be higher than what you think it is because all the moisture in the stem. And in their case, they were still too high to be able to store and ferment that safely. Of course, if we get a lot of rainfall, most work you read says a drought-ending rainfall or a significant amount, because you actually need it to get into the soil, plants to be able to take that up to move those nitrates. Nitrates can become a concern because that can flush back into the plants when they're taking up all that water, and there's excess amounts sitting there because they weren't taken up due to the dry conditions. So I know some areas, that had been very, very dry got like an inch of rainfall, so that could start to be a concern. And I think, the best course of management would be to monitor levels and see if those are manageable. When they're fermented, those levels usually go down after fermentation, but still have an idea of what you've got there, or if that can be managed with cutting height and things like that. And then, of course, ending things up, silo gas, if nitrates are an issue, silo gas can become a concern as well if those nitrate levels are high. And then just to end things, I think, preparing for harvest in fields where moisture stress has been severe, I think it's just important to, prepare for more variability. Obviously, variability across the field, high and low areas with different amounts of stress. Small cobs, small and variable cobs. I was looking at some fields in Central Ontario this week where the bottom of the cob was at milk stage and the tip of the cob was at blister. So a lot of variability in maturity of those kernels, and likely at fall time, the moisture of those kernels as well. And then obviously issues like lodging or ears falling off and issues like that just related to the drought stress. Obviously not a round list of things, but some of the things to think about. With that, I will pass things over to Christine.
Thanks, Ben. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. For those who don't know me, I'm Christine O'Reilly. I'm the forage and grazing specialist with OMAFA, and I'm based out of the Lindsay office. So tonight I was asked to just do a bit of a deeper dive into salvaging a grain crop to feed to ruminant livestock. I know some of you on the call have livestock at home. This is not going to be a comprehensive list of your options. You have more options than just salvaging the crop. So if you are looking for a bit more information on that topic, Beef Farmers of Ontario did a webinar at noon. They have posted their recording on the website where myself and our two beef specialists went over your broader list of options. I'll stick the link to that in the chat after I'm done talking. So yes, salvaging a grain crop is one option. It's not all of your options. But given that everyone on this call grows grain, we thought it was timely to kind of give an overview of sort of what that process looks like. If I can get my slide to advance, here we go. So Debbie and Ben both said that the process is if the crop is insured, you need to call Agricorp first. I'm going to be a bit cheeky and say that maybe your first step is actually checking the labels of the crop protection products that have been applied, because there are a lot of things out there that might prohibit actually feeding that crop to livestock. And it would be disappointing to tie up the phone line a second time calling Agricorp back to say, actually, no, that won't work. So the easiest way to check those crop protection product labels is to go onto the Ontario Crop Protection Hub. If you scroll down, there is a product search feature, okay? Click on that, type in the name of the product that got sprayed on it, whether it's a herbicide, fungicide, an insecticide. It'll pull up a profile. If you click view details, you should be able to follow a couple of links through to Health Canada's website, which will give you the most current label for that crop protection product. And the reason that I suggest doing this on a computer rather than going to where you keep your labels and having a read through is that reading crop protection labels is kind of a nightmare. And if you pull it up on the computer like this, you can hold down the control button and press F on your computer's keyboard, and it will bring up a little search bar at the top of the screen. And then I suggest typing in one at a time each of these keywords I've got on the screen, because the computer will then highlight every time that product label uses that keyword. And you can just use the up and down arrows to toggle through to see every time that word was mentioned in the document, and it makes it a lot faster to find what you're looking for. So what we're trying to do is assess whether your pre-harvest interval will prohibit harvesting for forage. If there's a pre-grazing interval, often pre-harvest and pre-grazing intervals are different. So checking those out. Some products will explicitly state that you cannot use the crop that you've sprayed with that product for hay, silage, fodder, feed, grazing, all the keywords I've got on this slide. Some product labels don't say anything, which means that they haven't been tested for safety for animals. So best to err on the side of caution and not feed those if the label is silent on that matter. And also make sure that you are using the product name that you applied. Sometimes it's not the active ingredient in a product that can be a problem for livestock. Sometimes it's an adjuvant, an emulsifier, something else that's in that formulation that can be a health challenge. So make sure that you're typing in the product name that you used to get the right result, so that you can actually check on all of those potential limitations. Once you've done that check, if the crop's insured, then you call Agricorp to work through their process to have the use changed. So how can we use these crops to help out ourselves if we have livestock at home or a neighbor who might be looking for feed? Cereals is kind of a weird one. We're not really at a time of year where we're salvaging them. They are a bit more flexible. We can graze them, we can make baleage out of them, we can make silage out of them, depending on what stage of development they're at. But since we're not really salvaging that right now, I'm just going to move on. Corn. Corn we could potentially graze. We could also make corn silage. However, corn is not going to dry down for dry hay, and it's not something we can put up as baleage. It's not going to preserve well when wrapped. Couple of things to think about before chopping that for silage is testing the moisture content. So while we know the crop is very dry, sometimes it's not as dry as it looks. Sometimes it's drier than we think. So having a moisture test really will help make sure that we can preserve that crop appropriately. And if it is slightly on the dry side, try to aim to feed that out during January and February when it's coldest to help reduce heating when that silo is open, because dry silage is definitely a fire hazard. And some of those silos can go weeks or even months smoldering away before anyone notices. They're a really potentially really dangerous situation with extremely dry silage. So a moisture test before chopping is really important. If you decide to, or your neighbor decides to graze it, strip grazing is a great one for both rationing out the feed so that it's not wasted, but also to help avoid rumen acidosis, so making cows really sick, or sheep. Ideally, minimum 1 day's worth of forage at a time, maximum 3 days, because that keeps what they're eating a little bit more consistent and helps minimize that. Ben talked a little bit about a high risk of nitrates in the crop. You can raise the cut height a little bit. Nitrates tend to accumulate in the bottom of the plant. So cutting it a little higher, yes, it lowers the yield, but it can also lower the nitrate concentration. But we absolutely suggest getting a test done to check for nitrates with any of these moisture stressed corn crops. And that's not included in a standard forage test. Just like our soil test, nitrates is its own special thing. So the labs that run feed and forage analyses also offer nitrate tests. That's a separate analysis, but that's really, really important. And silo gas is also a potential challenge just because, again, high nitrate in a crop and it convert to N2O gas, that can be a major hazard for both human and livestock health. So be very wary of that. Soybeans, they're very, very unlikely to pass the pesticide label check. Unless someone was planning to use them as forage from the beginning, there's almost nothing that we typically spray on beans that are safe for feeding or have a pre-harvest or pre-grazing interval that's short enough that we could practically use this crop. However, if there are no beans, like if those pods are not filling, you could graze it. I caution you against grazing it once the pods start to fill, because raw soybeans can cause ammonium toxicity, which can kill ruminants. So that's vegetative is fine. You might be dealing with a bit of bloat risk, but otherwise should be fine. Once the pods start filling, that's risky. I've got some sources that say if the crop is vegetative, it might dry for hay. But I don't know of anyone in Ontario who has done that, and our humid climate can make drying some of these annual crops a bit tricky. So maybe, but it's not going to preserve as baleage or silage because it doesn't have a ton of sugar in it. So there's not a lot of substrate to ferment. It's very difficult to pack tightly, so it's hard to exclude the air. And soybeans, just even if you get that right, they buffer like crazy against a pH drop. So I would hate for anyone to put in the effort and have open up the silo or the wrapped bales a few weeks later and realize you've got a slimy, rotten mess you can't feed. So of all of these crops, soybeans are going to be the toughest. I'd say stay away. They're probably not going to pass the pesticide label check. Canola, you could graze it. Brassicas really don't preserve well in any form, so we're not going to try to store that as forage, but you could graze canola. It's a shorter term safe grazing window. There are a few animal health risks on brassicas that do need to be managed, and the links on the screen really will walk you through what those are if you need that information. And they're low in fiber, so feeding a fiber source like hay or straw would help prevent animal health challenges there. Last, one of my last points I'm going to leave you with is there was a bunch of research done kind of 2013 through 15 looking at what are our options for after winter cereals come off. And the best bang for your buck is 80 pounds an acre of oats plus 50 pounds an acre of nitrogen and a fungicide to control crown rust. Because if we get the rain, hopefully we get the rain to get those oats out of the ground, the crown rust will take it. So that's the recipe. I would say if you aren't set up to apply fungicide, you could do spring triticale. The yield potential is only slightly less than oats, although the seed cost is comparable or slightly above oats plus fungicide. And lastly, when it finally does rain, like Ben mentioned, there's a high risk of nitrates in corn for sure, but also cereals and any of our grasses that are on ground that has had a lot of nitrogen applied or manure applications. So we really need to wait, ideally at least a week before harvesting or grazing. That gives the plants a chance to turn all of those nitrates into protein. So it brings that danger level down. I mentioned it before, I'll say it again, get a nitrate test before allowing livestock to eat those crops because there's a lot of high nitrate feed out there and we don't want to have a wreck. Work with a nutritionist to dilute those forages to safe levels and really be aware of the increased risk of silo gas coming off of those. So my contact information is up on the screen. I'm happy to field some questions afterwards as well if anyone's looking for information on other options in addition to salvaging a grape.
Thank you, Christine, very much. I know there has been some questions I see come up in the chat during your presentation, but just to remind everyone at home, we have close to an hour slated for questions at the end of our experts' presentations. And so we'll have lots of time to get those questions answered. So with that, next, I would invite to present Peter Doris, the environmental specialist with OMAFA, to present on water taking considerations for us. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. And going to maybe shift gears slightly here for just a few slides because with the severity of the dry period we've had, there's been a little bit of questions about when you might need a permit or not need a permit for taking water. And the requirements are different depending if we're talking about crops and pasture versus if we're talking about livestock watering. And so I'll cover that in just a few minutes here. So the permit to take water program is administered by our colleagues in Ministry of Environment. You can see the link at the bottom there in the green to the guide that they have for the permit to take water. And so the permit to take water for irrigation of crops or pasture is required if taking greater than 50,000 liters per day. And so 50,000 liters a day, if somebody's trying to visualize that, that's not an overly large swimming pool. It's not a lot of water. 10,000 gallons is roughly what it is. And I had another producer later today pointed out that the big milk transport trucks we see on the road, those are about 38,000 liters, just to kind of give you some visual cues to kind of help you put in there. So 50,000 liters a day will roughly give you about 1 inch of water on half an acre of ground, if you're looking at it in that method. So as I alluded to earlier, the approvals are done by Ministry of Environment. There is a specific branch in the Ministry of Environment that does the approvals. Your local district office can offer some helpful guidance, but ultimately your application, if you decide to go that route, is going to end up in Toronto. When you look at the guide, you will see that whether it's groundwater or whether it's surface water, there are 3 categories that you would be placed in. And part of it is going to be kind of what and how you're using the water, but the big part of it is really what is the source. So in other words, is it a small stream, or are we talking a big lake like Lake Ontario, for example? And a big body of water like Lake Ontario, for example, is actually probably much easier to get than a small stream, because the volume of water you're taking as a percentage is very, very small compared to that small body of water that if you want to take, I'm going to pick a number, say 200,000 liters a day, that may be a very significant pull from that smaller body of water. So as you go from 1 to 3, and as you move up the numbers, the requirements for, say, a hydrogeological assessment will go up as well. Permit to take water for livestock watering purposes, livestock and poultry watering purposes, there's a much higher threshold, and that threshold is 379,000 liters per day. And so at this afternoon's presentation, I had a slide in there, and the high milking dairy cows, a high milking Holstein dairy cow will take about 155 liters per day, because if you think about all the milk that she is producing, and if you kind of work that back, you're roughly into the neighborhood of probably about 2,500 head of high milking Holstein cows to get to that level. So generally speaking, in Ontario, most of our livestock operations are well below the requirement there for livestock watering. There is several places you can go on the web for some resources. So if you Google Ontario Permit to Take Water Consultants, there is a list of consultants there. It's kind of in the open data stream that the Ontario government offers. We as a ministry, OMAFA does have some helpful hints for farmers that are considering irrigation. It's just Google Ontario Agricultural Irrigation and you will see information there. And then finally, at the last slide I have here, we'll have the contact information for the Ministry of Environment for their Permit to Take Water branch, and their email, and my email as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, with that, the final speaker for this evening, and before we open it up to the question period, Carmela Capelli, Senior Program Analyst with OMAFA, to share mental health resources for us. Welcome, Carmela.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. I just wanted to share with you tonight further information. Oops, sorry. There we go. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, so thank you, Jeff. Tonight, I just wanted to share some information with you about the mental health resources available to you, your family members, and to your farm employees. The ministry has partnered with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Ontario Division, to deliver the Agriculture Wellness Ontario program. And this is a suite of free mental health programs tailored for the agriculture community in Ontario. The Agriculture Wellness Ontario programs aims to provide essential mental health education, counseling services, and community support. This evening, I'm going to go through and highlight some of the Agriculture Wellness Ontario programs, but really highlighting the Farmer Wellness Initiative. The Farmer Wellness Initiative provides Ontario farms with mental health support, offering free, unlimited counseling for farmers, their farm workers, and family members. This is accessible 24 hours, 7 days a week, all year round, and available in French, English, and Spanish. You'll be connected to a mental health professional who has received specific training on how to best serve the unique needs of the Ontario farming community. These counselors have been trained in agriculture-specific stressors through the Canadian Agriculture Literacy Program, and which is provided by the Canadian Centre of Agriculture Wellbeing. This is evidence-based training that ensures that when you call, you're speaking to someone who understands the realities of farm life, from financial pressures to the emotional toll of running a farm. Next is the Guardian Network. And the Guardian Network is a volunteer, peer-driven community of mental health advocates that supports Ontario's farming community. They can identify when someone is struggling with their mental health and open up a discussion around their mental health and well-being and connecting those individuals to the appropriate mental health resources. AgWell also offers the In to Know program, which is a 3-hour training program delivered virtually or in person. And it's designed for farmers, their families, and those who are involved in the agriculture sector. In addition to that, they also provide growth workshops, which are quick, practical mental health workshops for the agriculture community in less than 1 hour or even less than that. For example, managing stress in agriculture. And lastly, there's the International Agricultural Worker Wellness Program. And this was designed to address the unique needs and mental health and wellness challenges faced by mental and physical well-being resources to ensure that they are receiving the proper support as they work and live here in Ontario. This program is currently being piloted in the Windsor, Essex, and Haldimand, Brant, Norfolk regions. Once again, it is recognized that this is a very stressful time and help is just a phone call away. Your well-being is vital for your farm. So please call the Farmer Wellness Initiative. The number here is on the screen, 1-866-267-6255. Also, here is a QR code. What I would highly recommend is for you to scan the code, and the Farmer Wellness number will directly download to your contact list. I would encourage you to save this number in your contact list for future use, or share it with others and your neighboring farmers as well. Lastly, here is a list of some helpful links to mental health resources. For example, we have the Grain Farmers of Ontario link directly, which again will highlight the Farmer Wellness Initiative. And also OMAFA's website listing similar mental health resources to other organizations such as your farm organizations, OFA, CFFO. And these will include references to, for example, the Connects Ontario, Ontario 211, the 988 National Suicide Crisis Helpline, and distress centers across Ontario, and much more. Thank you, and take care of yourself.
Thank you, Carmela, and to all of our presenters this evening. We are once again going to open it up for comments and questions. Just to review, please put your questions into our chat feature. If you are comfortable, you may also use the raise hand feature to ask your question verbally. We do remind you to be respectful when asking your questions, and please ensure that you are as brief as possible to respect the time here this evening of everybody involved. As we were going through the presentations, we did receive a couple of questions. So I will go and return to those now. So we did have one for Horst. If I can get Horst to come back, asking what's the ROI on mite control on a bean crop that may not hit 10 bushels an acre with the application?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's an interesting point. You bring up a very good point. I was trying to make people aware of the mite problem in fields that still have good yield potential. If the field has a 10 bushel yield potential, no, you would not spray anything in terms of a pest control product. Just there would be no return on investment.
Okay, thank you, Horst. And then for Ben, can a corn plant pollinate if the tassel is emerged out the top of the plant but wrapped tight in whorl leaves?
Yeah, so I think you'd still have to get pollen out of that tassel and down to the silks. So if that tassel wrapping is preventing that, then you're likely going to run into issues. Or if there's at least not a portion of tassels out in the field to do that. I know there's a lot of talk in the US about this issue this year. I haven't heard as much in Ontario, but there could be cases out there for sure. But yeah, if it's impeding pollen from getting to a lot of the silks, then you'd expect that to cause issues.
And Ben, I know that you did answer this question within the chat, but just in case there were a few people that didn't have their chat open and perhaps missed it, you did also get a question in terms of nitrate. And hearing about nitrate concerns for 1 week after a good rain, does that extend to sweet corn cobs? And should they be held from public sale?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't answer for sweet corn specifically. I don't have the experience there, but when we're talking silage corn, the biggest concern with nitrates is that corn plants usually accumulate them kind of in the bottom of that stalk. So I don't know the exact number, but let's say the bottom foot or two. That's where if you get a flush, they'll hang out there until that plant can move them when it starts to recover and, like Christine said, start to make proteins and things like that. So that would be a little bit different than the cob. But that said, if I was in the scenario and I wasn't sure, I would follow the same advice they use for silage, and you can get it tested and see if that there's any concerns with what levels are present there. But that's more of a silage more of a silage answer, but that's how I'd maybe approach it on the sweet corn side of things.
Yeah. Rachel, if I can just add one point, I also do not know the answer for this, and I agree with Ben that testing is the way to go. But the other piece that factors in here is humans are monogastrics. So part of why nitrate poisoning is such a big risk in ruminants is how their digestive system works. Their rumen very quickly turns nitrates into nitrites, and the nitrates pass across the rumen wall into the bloodstream and bind to methemoglobin. So basically tie up where oxygen should travel in the blood. Because humans are not ruminants, we are monogastrics. Our digestive system is not absorbing nitrates the same way. So not saying that too much nitrates can't be a problem in people. It absolutely can. Blue baby syndrome would be the normal human response to nitrate overload. But I'm not anticipating that being the same level of risk because of where it is in the plant and digestive system of the species consuming said plant.
And then maybe on the flip side, a question also came in, is nitrate a concern if it doesn't rain before harvest? Christine, did you want to take that, or perhaps Ben? I'll let you guys maybe both answer if you have some perspective.
Not as much. I mean, I would say anyone who got that rain kind of Monday afternoon, overnight, Tuesday morning, still be very cautious because depending on where you were, amounts varied. And that might have been enough to move nitrogen into the plant. So still take that week of window to just let the plant metabolize that. But if it has not rained, nitrogen doesn't have a mechanism to get into the plant. It has to move into the roots with water. So your nitrate risk is lower, but your safest practice is always test that feed, because all of it is going to be doing weird things this year because those plants are stressed. So feed test, nitrate test, and then you know what you're working with.
Yeah, and I'd agree with Christine. The biggest emphasis around safety is always when you get those big flushes that they call kind of a drought-ending rainfall. But that's just the emphasis. It's not like normal silage. I would, like Christine said, get it tested just so you know.
And what is the turnaround time on nitrate testing? That is another question that we've received.
I haven't run a sample, but like when we get tissue sampling done at labs, it depends on the lab, I think, and I'd want to talk to the lab to know for sure. But with tissue samples, we can usually get them back in a couple of days if we're in a rush kind of thing. But I would connect with your lab to verify. But you're talking likely days, not weeks, kind of thing, in my experience with other sampling.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for those questions. Moving back now to some crop insurance questions. Debbie, perhaps we can call on you to answer this one. I didn't purchase crop insurance. Can I apply to one of the programs still? Any binding contracts that would be involved in that? There's new land from 2 years ago to cash crop. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the question here. Hard to have previous years. Hard to know what the previous yields were and how would that be in terms of applying for a program?
Sure. I can talk about a few different things. So I'll start by talking about our deadlines for the business risk management programs. For production insurance for spring seeded crops like corn, soybeans, our enrollment deadline is May 10th. This is also the deadline for the risk management program for grains and oilseeds. For the enrollment deadline for agri-stability this year was extended to July 31st. And I encourage, if you're a customer and or someone that didn't get into the program and you have questions about your eligibility, give us a call and we can chat through your scenario. You also had a question about, is there premiums or fees? So for both production insurance and the risk management program, there is a premium that is reflective of your production capacity. So it's reflective of your 10-year history, your coverage choices, and that premium is also funded by the government up to 60%. So that is a very affordable option to participate in production insurance in Ontario and Canada as well. For agri-stability, there is a fee to participate. And all the information is on our website about the specific fees and premiums that are required to participate in the programs.
Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. There's another program question. What is the cap of funds available for RMP? Has it been increased?
Great question. Yes. So for 2025, the program, the government contributions or the government contributions to the program is 180 million. So that has increased 30 million since 2024. And earlier this year, we heard that the Ontario government made a commitment to increase those funds by 100 million over the next 3 years to 250 million.
Thank you for that, Debbie. We've also had a question in regards to contracts. And if contracts can't be met, walk us through the process of contracts for new crop corn and soybeans that you can't fill because you have no crop to harvest. Now, I'm not necessarily sure that is something that can be directly answered by the people we have on the call today, but I would note that Grain Farmers of Ontario has produced a grain contracts guide, which you can find on the marketing tab of our website, gfo.ca. And we'll provide the direct link within the chat in a moment. But within that grain contracts guide, there are a few tips that you can reference when it comes to not being able to meet your contract that you might have. And so, things like that, definitely speak to your grain company as soon as you're aware of a shortfall or any sort of production failure. In most contracts, you are still obligated to notify the grain company that you are experiencing a problem and that you maybe not are going to be able to meet what you have previously agreed to. And so proactive open communication is always the best course of action to take with that. And there might be some ways that you can work with your grain buyer to understand, if you're not going to be able to deliver that grain what else can you do? Can you perhaps do some negotiations to reduce how much you are going to be delivering? Can you perhaps buy some grain from a neighbor who can help you deliver against that contract? Are you going to maybe be able to roll your delivery over into the next crop year when you do expect to have a bit more production available? But again, there could be some potential as well for some insurance support as well with that. So perhaps Debbie, you might have some extra comments to that, or John will open for either of you to respond if you would like.
Yeah, and I can just comment quickly. So the majority of our customers that are in production insurance select the floating claim price, and the floating claim price is really designed to provide that replacement price. If you're experiencing a yield shortfall, you'll be compensated at the price at which it will cost you to replace any crop within a contract. So our prices are determined during a survey window at harvest time. For soybeans, it's between the 1st and 21st of October. And for corn, it's October 21st to November 10th.
Great. Thank you for that, Debbie. And again, if you do feel like you would like to ask a question live, raise your hand. If you're not familiar with where that is, just go down to the bottom of your screen and select the React menu and select raise hand from that point on. Just taking a look here to see if we do have anything else in the queue for questions. I'm not seeing any, but we did have a couple of comments from producers during the chat just about how difficult the season has been with the conditions. One comment about soybeans that had flowers, but most have dried up and the pods are not forming very well. Pods that are there are about 1/8 to 1/4 long and haven't changed in a few weeks now. Horace, I'm not sure if you have any comments on the state of those soybeans. Is there any hope? Is there anything maybe that can happen from this point forward where we might be able to recover some of those yields?
Well, the only thing I can really say is that those pods, while they're still attached, still have the chance to fully develop the seed, right? And so eventually, if it doesn't rain, many of them will also abort, unfortunately. So yeah, it's sad for sure. And I mean, I didn't say this while I talked, but in my career, in my experience, starting off with a good crop and then watching it wither away is probably one of the most discouraging things you can go through as a crop producer. So certainly, our feelings go out to those that have that situation. But no, unfortunately, there's not much I can add to that.
Mm-hmm. And in your experience, Horst, have you seen similar years to this? What can we maybe give us a bit of historical perspective on the situation that we're dealing with this year?
Well, it's so regional, right? I mean, I need to be very careful in terms of making broad statements, and because there are many really good beans in the province as well, right? Those areas that received a good rainfall. Specific regions, no question. There's no easy answers. When I started in 2001, we had the double whammy of soybean aphids and a really dry year, right? And so then 2002 was also dry, and 2003 was not great either. And so from there on, there have been other years for sure that have been on the dry end. Yeah.
So we do still have time for additional questions as well. We did have one early on in terms of the recording of this webinar and where it's going to be made available. So it will be posted to the Grain Farmers of Ontario YouTube channel. And so we will provide that link again, as well as the other links that you have been seeing flowing through the chat box as well. So don't worry if you've missed any of that. We will be emailing out all of those links. I do see we have a hand raised from Gregory Vandenbosch. Gregory, I invite you to unmute and ask your question at this time.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just want to take the opportunity on behalf of the Board of Agricorp to remind people, if you have not already signed up for direct deposit, this is definitely the year you want to do that. Really helps get those payments out in a timely and efficient manner. And you know, it's not going to be the solution, but it can certainly help.
For sure. Thank you for that, Gregory. We appreciate that. Just seeing a couple of other comments coming into the chat, just people sharing experiences. Worst I've seen over 50 years harvesting, 2 months of no rain and it just being so very, very hot. Another comment, 2025 is my 42nd crop on my own, closer to 50 with my father's supervision, and that's the driest that they can recall. So definitely some farmers on the call here with a lot of experience that are sharing that it has been, you know, an unusual year for them in their region, as you say, Horst, you know, with the weather being the way it is, it's never the same, even from one farm to the next. I know I was talking with a producer the other day, and they said at my home farm, we've had a little bit of rain, but just a few fields over, they've not had anything. So it definitely is variable and difficult to deal with in this type of a situation. So again, we'll do another call for any more questions that people may have before we wrap up our call today. And I will say, if you don't have anything tonight, but maybe tomorrow after you think about all the stuff that you've heard on our call today, you know, I'm available to connect with and support you in directing you to the proper resources, connecting you with the folks on the call here this evening as well. You know, encouraging you to reach out again, not just on the production side, but on the mental health side as well. You know, if you are struggling, you are not alone. We are all here to support you. Agriculture is such a great community. There's always different ways that you can find support that somebody is out there to help you with. So please don't think that you are alone in this situation, perhaps as bad as it does look while you are out walking the fields. Just remember that as we do wrap up our talk tonight. I do see that, you know, some comments as well. Thankful for crop insurance and risk management programs, and we do thank our partners in facilitating the delivery of those. And as we said earlier, we know that sometimes there can be frustrations when you're trying to call somebody to get that support, but you know, everybody is trying their best. And we'll remember that tip that Debbie gave us to try not to call over lunchtime, and they will get back to you for sure. I do see that we did potentially have another question, though, that came in. Any input on pricing for salvaging a corn crop for silage? Does Ben or Christine want to take that question?
Yeah, Rachel, there's some articles on Field Crop News that have some guidance. Typically, you're trying to negotiate between what it costs you to produce that and maybe what the value of that silage is from a feed perspective. And I know we do have a spreadsheet as well that kind of gives you some things, some prompts to kind of fill in yourself to try to build some of those numbers. I don't have the link for that, but
I just stuck the link in the chat as a response to that question.
Perfect.
Yeah, the crop side of the math is relatively straightforward because it's weighing out cost of production that have been incurred versus won't be incurred, and how that changes between combine harvest and grain drying versus silage harvest. The harder side of that equation is what is it worth as feed, because that very much depends on what other feed is available and the nutritional value of that feed. So that is the kind of calculation that livestock nutritionists are set up with software to do, and most of the rest of us are not. So yeah, we do have resources for the crop angle of that. If a livestock farmer is listening and are trying to cost it out, talk to a nutritionist. They're the best position for that. But yeah, whether a livestock farmer is willing to pay what a crop farmer is asking kind of depends on what other feed options they have available to them as well.
Great, thank you for that advice. That's fantastic. And again, links in the chat will be sent out. So if you're not able to copy and paste onto your computer as we're going, we will be sending those out to you. I do see lots of great comments again popping up in the chat, again talking about support that everybody should have for each other. And don't forget about your families, right? They feel the pressure as well when times get difficult. And, we want to make sure that we are all taking care of each other. And there's the one quote that Caitlin from Agriculture Wellness Ontario has shared, take care of yourself and take care of each other. And I hope that tonight's webinar is maybe an example of that, of us trying to take care of each other within our grain farming community here. Again, please keep the questions coming. We do have a little bit more time left allocated for our webinar this evening, and we will try and get to as many questions as come up. We have a question here. What happens when your 10-year average is so low that it doesn't meet the thresholds to trigger a crop insurance claim? Debbie, is that a question you can help us with?
Sure, and I think I would refer back to our buffering information that I shared in our deck. So any time that you have a low year, it's really trying to buffer those extreme yields so that it's really representative of the average crop that you're able to produce. If you've had 5 out of 10 dry years and your average is going down, those extreme yields have been buffered, so it's going down quite a bit less than if it was using the actual yields. If you have questions on your individual average, again, the best thing to do is call us. Every situation is different, and we can talk through and explain what the information your average is built upon, and make sure we're answering any of your questions individually.
Thank you for that, Debbie. Back to Ben for this question. R3 stage to R6 in this drought, what are your thoughts on timing?
Yeah, so typical R3 or milk stage, kind of when the kernels just get their yellow color and they're still, kind of sweet, not starchy yet. Typically you'd expect you're about 5 weeks from maturity in an average year. Of course, if you're in a year that's hot and dry, you could move grain fill along further than that. But an average, you'd expect 5 under hot and dry conditions. Maybe it goes quicker than that. But I don't have an actual estimate or number based on the moisture stress that we've got.
Thank you, Ben. There was also a comment that there may be the need to truck feed in. So this is maybe not directly related to grain, but maybe like a hay situation, having to truck in or various feedstocks from a farther distance. I'm not sure, John, if maybe you have a comment on this. Would there be any support programs or anything that would apply to the added costs that farmers may be facing if they do need to be shipping in feed because they have not either grown the crop or been able to get those hay cuts?
Yeah, again, I think everybody's circumstance is different, but a lot of those types of extraordinary costs, the extra costs that are incurred, would go into that year's margin calculation. So a program like Agri-Stability that looks at all of the income and all of the expenses that are in the allowable categories would probably start to account for extra costs, reduced incomes, and a margin decline. And as Debbie kind of went through earlier, that Agri-Stability program is there for really the catch-all of situations. So the combination of things. But again, it's an individualized program, so everybody's circumstances will be different.
Thank you for that, John. I'm not seeing any further questions coming up in our chat or any more comments to share or address. So Jeff, I might just turn it back over to you for any final thoughts or comments that you might have at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rachel. I want to thank the presenters that took time to help farmers across the province here tonight. I know as this summer has brought this upon us across Ontario, the grain farmers of Ontario have certainly had dialogue with decision makers at every level of government, OMAFA and Agricorp staff. And I can assure you they understand the severity of what farmers are dealing with and doing everything they can to help us. And tonight was an example. They all showed a real appetite to bring their expertise and help farmers understand what they can clearly expect out of the programs, realistically what those programs can do for farmers, provided they are enrolled in them and have taken part. So it's good for farmers to have that understanding. And it's also important for you to understand, yes, you're not alone, but Agricorp and OMAFA are here to help. And you can reach out and have engagement with them and deal with your own specific situation, as many have alluded to here tonight, that call in, have a discussion, and they're more than willing to help. So, as I mentioned, contact the speakers through the contact center and the Ag Information Contact Center, and you can speak to someone directly and get in contact with the various present their expertise prior tonight. Once again, I know Carmela and Rachel both spoke to the mental health resources that are available for farmers. I know with commodity prices and production issues, it can certainly be challenging for a lot of farmers. So for those that need it, please take advantage. Know that you're not. And I thank you for everyone's participation. Our presenters are joined us as well as our farmers across the province. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time tonight.